3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Fourth Line Podcast, part of Full Press Radio. This is May the 10th, 2021. With you today is myself, Carl, and Stevie Nick.
May the 10th just doesn't have the same ring to it as May the 4th does.
May the 10th be with you today, Nick.
Thank you. The 10th what?
The 10th time trying to figure out when the NHL playoffs are going to start.
I think it's been more than 10 times, Carl.
Well,
it's going to be soon, though.
Probably sometime this week.
Probably. You think they're going to tell us sometime soon?
They might tell us this week. They might tell us before the players know.
Imagine it's just like, surprise, we start tonight.
Better be there, because hop on a plane right now. Yeah,
it's got to be hard for some of those markets in the States, eh? Because they're selling tickets.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably pretty easy with limited capacity to be able to sell tickets right now, because no one's full capacity yet. So, and that's what we were watching something this week. I was watching something and they were advertising that something was a sold out event in Las Vegas. I'm like, yeah, everything's sold out right now because you've got like 10,000 people, 5,000 people in the building.
A quarter of the building is sold out.
Yeah, we have sold out a quarter of our space. So yeah, I mean, look, Florida Panthers games in the start of this season were sold. I mean, now they're in the playoffs. Now there's no reason for them not to be sold out.
That's true. They're going to break some attendance records probably.
Are they? Yeah, if they were allowed to have everyone in the building, a Florida versus Tampa playoff series, you know that's going to happen.
Did Florida even... Okay, look, I'm going to say this before I even get into this. This is a low blow. Did Florida even have to limit their capacity this year?
It was voluntary. They really, you know what? Have at her. Do your best.
Full capacity. You can still social distance in that arena.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I know someone that went to a game there and said it was a great time. So,
was it me?
No, during like this season.
Oh, this year. Oh, yeah. You know someone who went to a sporting event this year?
I do.
That's so exciting.
A podcast listener.
Wow.
Actually, the Scotty who makes our jingles. He went, I believe, to see your Red Wings play. It's all coming full circle.
Well, I'm happy for him. He deserves it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got a ton to get to this week. We are going to do a little bit. I mean, we might have some time to talk about what we got for playoff matchups, but there has been a ton that happened in the NHL this week. So let's get started where the whole week began. New York Rangers, Washington Capitals.
Ooh, baby. So let's establish a timeline here. Did the initial incident happen on a Monday night? I think it was a Monday night the initial incident happened.
I believe the Wilson, Buchnevich, Panarin was Monday night after almost immediately after we finished recording the show.
Right. So that's the night where there's the scrum down in the Washington crease. Tom Wilson cross-checks Buchnevich, his head into the ice. Panarin jumps in. Wilson, dummies him a little bit, throws him to the ice. The next day, Tuesday, is when the Department of Player Safety punished Tom Wilson.
Did they?
Sorry, this is an audio venue, so I didn't do the air quotes, but I meant to include them. Punish Tom Wilson.
So that was when they handed him a $5,000 fine.
Yeah. And the maximum allowed under the CBA.
Of course it was. So let's start right there. I guess it was either suspension or maximum allowable fine. Was what he did suspendable to you?
Yes.
Was it a Tom Wilson suspension or an anyone did that they should be suspended?
Both. I think anyone who did that probably should have been suspended. And I think it should have been a couple extra games because it was Tom Wilson.
I think it should have, at least one game for those actions would have been, for Tom Wilson, I think would have been reasonable. I would for anyone else, I don't think I would have been too surprised with just the fine. And we've talked on the show that the minimum or maximum allowable fines in the NHL is a joke and that needs to be gone. But I was moderately okay with no suspension, but knowing the history of what Tom Wilson has done, a game or two, I think, was warranted there.
Okay, but so I was going to talk about this later because the Department of Player Safety has had a very busy week with all the punishments it's doled out. They suspended Pat Maroon for one game. I think it was yesterday, based on roughing on his way to the penalty box. And I looked at that incident and I thought, is that worse than what Tom Wilson did in some way to Buchnevich and Panarin?
That one was interesting because what he was actually suspended for, they deemed unsportsmanlike conduct, which if we're suspending people for unsportsmanlike conduct, then lots of more players got to be going.
Right. So I think my point here is that this Department of Player Safety is all over the map. Like, they've never had consistency. Let's be honest. We've always made jokes about how well/poorly they do their job. But this past week, looking at the different penalties that they've handed out and each of the plays, I'm like, who's making these decisions? It makes no sense to me as an outsider.
Well, and I think that do I think that the Department of Player Safety should have made that kind of a penalty a suspension? Absolutely. But with what we see leading up to that, absolutely not. But like you said, this week has been all over the map. It's almost like they got called out and someone above them said, hey, you know that they're right. And they started buckling down.
It does feel like someone had that conversation with them, doesn't it?
It feels like someone got sat down and said, figure it out, or we're going to give you what the Rangers want.
I mean, I hope so, because that means that the Rangers' fine it worked. You know, their public statement that they made, I guess, Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday evening or whatever.
Yeah. So then let's get into that. The New York Rangers came out after the lack of suspension happened with Panarin out, Buchnevich feeling the effects as well, and released a statement saying that they support their players, they do not agree with it, and George Parros, as the head of the Department of Player Safety, should be fired.
Man, when was the last time you saw a team do something so spicy?
I'm not sure ever. I'm not sure I've ever seen a team call for an NHL employee to be fired. Like, we have seen maybe a coach in the heat of the moment will say like that ref should be fired, right?
Yep.
Sure. But this
was thought about. This was thought about. It was drafted. It went through several levels of management for approval, and then it was sent to the social media guy to post online. Like, this was very well thought out.
There was multiple times where they could have stopped themselves, and they didn't.
Yeah. This was not an emotional... I mean, it was an emotional response, but there was plenty of time for the emotions to cool down before hitting send on that one.
They knew exactly what they were doing, and I appreciate them so much for it. And like you mentioned, they ended up being fined $250,000, 50 times what Tom Wilson was fined for his punishment.
So dumb.
And that is why minimum fines got to go.
Yeah. These player fines are a little ridiculous. And I get the NHLPA is protecting their own and negotiating them this way, but this is silly. And the crazy thing is, you know, listening to some of the reporters and media talk about it after, they all thought the Rangers were going to get dinged with a bigger fine than the $250K.
Yeah.
Like, it's expected that teams get fined $500K, $1 million. That's expected, but the players don't go over $5,000.
Just ridiculous that's the way that went down. And I mean, good on them. Good on them for standing up for their players and saying what they think, saying that they don't think that is correct and something needs to be done. Was it a little much? Possibly. But the NHL and the NHL like Department of Player Safety has not acted like they care in any way throughout this year. And when your players are getting hurt, stand up for them. Absolutely. Say that something's got to change.
If the NHL is not going to, the Rangers took a step forward and they did it themselves. So, it happened both at a management level and then the following day on the ice.
Right. So now correct me if I'm wrong. There's one more thing that happened before the on the ice incident, correct? Timeline wise, I believe we have a double firing that happened.
Yes, before. You're right. That happened before the game, didn't it?
Yes. So this has happened. So we are now on Wednesday afternoon. Incident happened Monday night. Wednesday afternoon, the New York Rangers come out and announce the firing of President John Davidson and General Manager Jeff Gorton.
Okay.
In no way related to the statement that was released the day before.
Okay. So before I ask you this question, I wanted to say, yes, this is the Rangers said that it's not related to the statement or the Wilson stuff at all. And it came out that Jeff Gorton and what's the other guy's name? The president, John Davidson did not agree with putting out the statement.
Yes.
Now, do you think the firing of those two individuals was related to the whole statement incident issues happening there?
Absolutely. There is no way. I mean, optics aside, if you don't want it to look like that, wait a week. There was nothing that changed between like you waiting even until you're done playing that game that night, knowing full well what's going to happen that night when they are playing the Capitals again. You could wait until Thursday. You could wait till Friday to make that decision and announce it. But to do it then, that's absolutely connected and related.
There were like 3 or 4 games left in the season at that point. You couldn't just wait till the end of the season. Like, why are you making this move now?
And it's also not like they needed to hurry up and hire someone that was like going to get signed.
Yeah, right?
They promoted from within.
Right. Now, I do believe that this was going to happen regardless of the Tom Wilson incident and the statement. I think it was going to happen regardless. But I think they sped it up to do it at that moment because those two individuals spoke out against that statement.
I agree. And I think that their decision to do that and say that that was like something that they wanted to do was also very short-sighted. I think they have done a fantastic job of speeding up this rebuild. They've done a great job. I mean, granted, they got very lucky in drafting, but like, what more were you wanting them to get into the playoffs? You said that they underperformed this year. They realized what they had. They didn't want to mortgage the future to try to have short-term success. What else are you wanting out of them?
I totally agree. I don't understand the decision. The only thing I can think of is you got Chris Drury sitting in, I don't know how hierarchy works in the NHL teams, but middle management call it. He had an opportunity to go interview with the Penguins for that big job, and he decided not to. He pulled himself out of that to stay with the Rangers. So I think there's also something there that, I don't know, maybe Chris Drury was promised something. Maybe he was told it's coming sooner than you think. But there was that whole side of it too that I think played a part.
And I can see, I mean, we do see that in management and coaching, more so management, right? Like, I think that was a big thing that we saw in the Leafs GM saga when Dubas was like, well, we gotta give him the GM job before, because at the time there was talks that Colorado had reached out to him to bring him in there and things like that. So certainly we've seen that before, but
it kind of feels like the Rangers made their choice in Chris Drury. Rightly or wrongly, I agree with you. I think the previous management team was doing a great job. I think they've done amazing things in the 3 years since they wrote a letter to the fans saying, look, this is going to take a while. The Rangers are in good shape.
Well, and now I look at all Rangers PR letters in a different light. Because if that didn't come from the president of the organization and it didn't come from the general manager of the organization, who's writing these things?
Right? That was my question too. How are these things getting approval if these people are not seeing it? Who's sending this out, going behind their backs, not including them on the emails? It seems crazy.
Just straight from ownership down, which, hey, go for it.
Absolutely. I like it as a bystander.
Yeah. Which brings us to Wednesday night, in which the New York Rangers and Washington Capitals set their opening night lineups. And you knew before the puck even dropped what was about to happen. Well,
you knew when you saw that Tom Wilson was being dressed that there would be some sort of, retribution taking place there. That he'd have to answer the bell, as they say.
Yes. Something would happen.
But what actually happened was way more than I think anyone expected. Game opens with a line brawl.
Yeah.
The three forwards drop the gloves as soon as the puck drops, and they go at it.
Yeah.
And then Tom Wilson hops the bench. Brendan Smith beelines towards him, and they have it out. And Brendan Smith kind of got his butt kicked, but, that's besides the point. And then, is it Dylan Strome who plays on the Rangers?
Yeah.
He drops the gloves a few minutes later in an offensive zone face-off right off the draw. There was, I think, 6 fights in the first 5 minutes.
I'm going with 5 fights is the tally that I have. Yeah.
5 fights in the first 4 minutes or 6 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
You don't see that very often in today's NHL.
And I still don't think we should. That was ridiculous. If the NHL thinks that that's how they want to market their game, that is a mistake. If your choice is to let Tom Wilson do what he did, and the only punishment is that he gets to kick Brendan Smith the next day, come on.
Well, the crazy thing, though, is towards the end of the first period in that game, he got a 10-minute misconduct penalty, and he was tossed out of the game. So he missed the game anyways.
Yeah.
And, what drives me crazy is they could have just suspended him for a game and avoided all of this. All of it. The Rangers calling them out publicly, the line brawling, the fighting. They could have avoided it all. But they didn't.
And is that what the NHL, clearly they're fine with it, right? Clearly they're okay with them not suspending, right? They made that choice.
Yeah.
This is what they want. This is what they think is going to be the best product for their league, is Tom Wilson doing what he wants, line brawls, teams calling them out. They think that that's good, and I disagree.
I mean, it's dramatic, that's for sure. But I don't know. I feel like it's grounded very much in old school NHL mentality of let's not get involved in the player's business. What happens on the ice happens on the ice. Let's let them figure it out on the ice. And the game's changed from the days where that was a very prominent thing, where it was a very popular thing. It's too fast now. There's not players out there just for the purpose of fighting each other. You can't rely on these players to police themselves anymore when the game's this fast, and this grounded in skill and athleticism, and it's just not a fighter's game anymore.
And the league has had a number of lawsuits against themselves for not taking the health and safety of their players seriously. And they come out and do this and don't punish actions and allow the plethora of fights at the start of that game to happen. And then they can turn around and say, we take player safety seriously. You don't care about player safety. You care about putting the product you want on the ice. And I would much rather watch. Tom Wilson is a good player when he's not a meathead.
Yeah.
I'd much rather watch that.
Unhinged. Like when you watch that clip with Panarin, he's unhinged in that clip. It looks like he just blacked out in rage, and didn't know what he was doing.
That checks out.
I've never seen anyone act like that before. Maybe on TV, but definitely not in my real life. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But I also think this is what you get when you take former players and you let them run that department. You get decisions like slap them with the fine and they'll take care of it on the ice if there's any more to talk about.
Not even former players, former enforcers, former people whose job it was to fight, and you put them in charge of that department. That's what's going to happen.
It makes no sense to me.
If you had a former 30 goal scorer running that department, it would look very different.
Imagine the Department of Player Safety actually protecting star players.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
So I actually just wanted to say one more thing. I think the NHL got very lucky during that game that all the players came out mostly unscathed. Because if somebody had gotten hurt, had fallen, hit their head, whatever, we'd be having a much different conversation right now. They would have been sending much different messages to the Rangers after the game. It would have all been very different.
Turns out they just wouldn't have accepted that. They would have kept putting the wrong answer in that e-transfer.
That's right.
What's the best hockey team in New York? Islanders? No, it's not working. Sorry.
I mean, Speaking of money, continuing our money transfer conversation from last week, do you think the Rangers ownership just lump sums $250,000 over to the league?
I assume so. Yeah.
Just wire it over, I guess.
Yeah. Why not? Right. I mean, I assume Uncle Gary swings by every now and again anyways, just to say hi. So then one of his stops, hand it over. And
then they take that $250K and just redistribute it evenly throughout the league.
Everyone's getting lunch on the Rangers today.
Yeah, that's a nice lunch. I'm gonna do this math right now. The Rangers will get $8,000 back.
That's great. I mean, it's 3% off? All penalties are 3% off when it's on the team. That's great. Plus, they also got a bit of a kickback from the Tom Wilson penalty, so they got a couple $100 off of that.
Do you think that they transferred $242,000, or that they transferred the full $250 and then had to pay banking fees twice when they reaccepted the $8,000 back?
The $1 transfer fee twice.
I'd fight that. I'd be on the phone with the bank all day.
Oh my goodness. All right. We have some things. So we talked, right? Playoffs are supposed to happen this week. We'll find out exactly what it is that's happening. But the NHL has officially announced that any team that has 85% of players fully vaccinated, meaning 2 weeks after they have gotten their final shot, have a new set of rules for the playoffs, which I think really came to light recently after repeated comments from Vegas's Robin Lehner, really pushing and putting the NHL on the spot and saying, you told us we would get this, now do it.
And they did it. Good for him, man. It has not been easy for the players, for the officials, for the coaches playing the way that they've played this year. Look, I don't think it's been easy for anybody in the league and in the world, but they've they've been hard at work to make sure that hockey can continue consistently. And now that they're getting to be fully vaccinated, they should get a bit of a break.
Yep. So some of the things that are changing, and really most of it we will not see on the ice. It will change nothing of on the ice, but they get to have greater freedoms. They get like mask wearing, travel, social gatherings, things like that are all able to happen more once the collective whole is taken care of. So I think that's good. This is another way that we can get to that point where we are, all getting to that point. But I mean, the players said they don't want a bubble. And if they're doing their job and taking care of themselves and taking care of each other, they deserve every right to not have to deal with some of these protocols.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I do think we'll see some of the results of it on the ice. Max Domi had an interesting quote, I think today or yesterday, where he had said like he wasn't sure about the vaccination, but he got it, and wow, he felt so relieved and positive. And he said that his game actually took off after he got vaccinated, because all that stress and anxiety that you don't even realize that you're holding on to as you go through your day-to-day right now, it gets lifted a little bit. So I think we will start to see some better hockey, some more smiles on the ice, hopefully. And I don't know, I think it's great for the players. Socializing is a huge thing for them, especially on the road.
So is that why Max Domi only has 9 goals this year? Just all that
COVID stress.
You know what? I didn't really think about it, but now that you mention it, poor Max Domi's had a rough go of it.
Checks out, eh?
Yeah. I mean, he scored against the Red Wings. So
yeah,
maybe he's not fully back to normal.
He's one of many who scored against the Red Wings.
He did it. Congratulations, Max.
Congratulations, Max Domi.
All right. I want to talk before we've got enough time here to sneak in one more segment before we head to break. Connor McDavid, 100 points this season. And I think as we go through the year, that's not really like a valuable talking point for us to just be like, Connor McDavid continues to perform. But now that he's reached 100, like the 100-point plateau in any season is an important one and a valuable one to consider. But if you were to look at it, even if he goes pointless in the rest of these games, 100 points in a 56-game season is equivalent to 146 in 82 games, which we have not seen that kind of performance in some time. With everything else that's happened this year in the world of hockey, where does McDavid's 100-point season stand? And obviously the last couple years, this is the best, but all-time performances, where are you putting McDavid's season this year?
Man, he's up there. It's really, 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 really good. And what actually amazes me about him, and I don't know if this is an Edmonton thing or an NHL thing, he's kind of flown under the radar. This week, a lot of people were talking about how amazing it was, but all year, I don't know. I know people assume Connor McDavid is the best player in the world, but this is this is probably better than anyone expected, right?
For what he did this season, or what he could do at all?
What he did this season.
Oh, hands down. There's no way that anyone could have seen this season coming from him.
It's really, 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 really good.
So I said 146 points is the equivalent. That is the 20th best season of all time. And the top 13 of those seasons are all Wayne and Mario.
I was going to say, must all be Wayne Gretzky.
We got Mario's on that list 4 times in that top 13. So Mario's, he was also quite good.
Okay, so Wayne's on there 9 times.
9 of the top 13 point seasons are Wayne, yes.
That is crazy. Okay, and then who else do we have on this list? Let's see. Look at that.
Steven Yzerman is on there.
Yeah. Were you gonna call him Stephen Y. Eiserman?
I was gonna go Weiserman. From like the Weiser family, obviously.
He's number 14.
Esposito, Bernie Nichols, Yager is like the most recent one on this list. We got Yager clocking in at in 1996.
Yeah.
Gretzky again, LaFontaine, Bossy, and then he would slot in there right before Esposito again.
That's amazing.
There's no one from like 96 on. We got into that dead puck era of giant equipment goalies and haven't found our way back to high scoring players since then. This is like era adjusted. This has to be up there with any of those 9 Wayne Gretzky seasons.
I would think so. But I don't know. But there's this whole other aspect, Carl. I know I bring this up a lot, but I don't know how to measure it. Like, he's played against 6 other teams this year. He's only played against 6 other teams.
How bad are those other teams, though? Like, are they actually that
Vancouver,
terrible?
Calgary, Ottawa, Montreal.
Mark Stone's had a great season down in Vegas, and he's got to play against the Kings, the Ducks, and the Sharks repeatedly.
Yeah, I know. And look, I'm not trying to add asterisks all over the place, but I'm just like, it keeps crawling into my head. Would McDavid be putting up this amount of points if he had to play every other team in the league? And if he was still in the Pacific Division with the Golden Knights and who else was in that division? I don't even remember anymore. Still the Canucks. But I have the same questions about like Austin Matthews too. Amazing 40-goal season this year.
Yeah.
He's shooting against the Habs, the Sens, the Flames. I don't know. I don't know how to measure it.
Shooting against the Oilers. Like, none of those teams are exactly defensive juggernauts.
Right.
Like, it's the Jets.
And none of them, except for the Jets, probably has elite goaltending either.
No, it is the Jets. The Jets are the only team with top caliber goaltending. I mean, even with where they're sitting at in the standings, the Flames likely eliminated from the playoffs tonight. And with what they've gotten from Jacob Markstrom, that's still probably the second best goaltending. Maybe Jake Campbell or Jack Campbell might have something to say.
Campbell's
about
been
that,
pretty good.
Nonetheless, though, that's where we're sitting at in that division.
Yeah. So it's hard. I'm absolutely not writing off what McDavid has done. It is so impressive. Even with the teams that he's playing against, it's amazing. I always have that thought in the back of my head that he's only played against 6 teams this year.
So you're not ready to because what I was going to say was that with what he's done this year, I say that he is in the top 3 of like players who've put up best seasons. It's him, Mario, and Wayne. And you're saying you're not ready yet?
I don't think I'm ready yet until I can figure out a way to adjust all of this based on the performance, the opponents he's faced.
Okay, so next year when he puts up 150 points against the rest of the NHL, then we'll be able to.
We can pull up this podcast and I will eat the entire thing.
You will eat. How do you want it on like vinyl?
I will. We'll put it on tape. Okay.
Okay. We'll record it on the tape. We'll sit there in front of listen on the radio. We'll record it, flip it around, do it the other side. And are you eating the entire cassette or just the tape?
No, just the tape. Here's what I'll do. Okay. I'll cut it up a little bit. I'll throw in some scrambled eggs and with cheese, of course. And that's how I'll eat it.
I was thinking spaghetti sauce would be a little better.
Yo, I love spaghetti.
Yeah. So just look, we'll even boil it for you. So like just to get rid of some of like those, the rougher parts. I don't want you to get hurt.
Just to get rid of like, the acidic and the finish.
Okay. So if he hits 146 point pace next year, or does he have to hit 146 points next year?
If it's a full season,
yeah,
he's got to hit the 146 points.
What if he like misses a couple games and he ends with 140?
Okay. Then he's got to hit the pace.
Okay. That's all I needed to know. You know what? So when he scores like 6 points in the first 2 games and then gets hurt,
misses the whole season,
misses the other 80 games of the season, better start getting those butter noodles ready, Nick.
Yeah, no kidding.
You heard it here first. Do not let us forget, listeners. I mean, there's no chance I'm forgetting if this is happening.
No, I don't think you would.
That doesn't seem like something I would do. All right, let's take a break here. We'll be back on the other side with the rest of what's happened this week in the NHL. 1, 2, 3.
I always forget that I have to start this part.
Well, here's the thing. We mutually agreed that we would start the second half of the show that way.
Yes, we did mutually agree that. Whether I was voluntold or not, we did eventually mutually agree to settle things that way.
That is what we mutually agreed upon. Which might be a buzzword in the NHL this week, as the Columbus Blue Jackets and Arizona Coyotes mutually agreed with their respective coaches that the coaches would not be back next year.
Oh, was the Arizona one mutual too?
They were both, yes. Everyone's just getting along so nice.
Don't you think that's just a nice way of saying we fired our coach? Like, you don't have to feel too bad for him.
Yeah. And like, we had a firing this week with the Rangers, and we had some mutually agreed upon termination of contracts.
I actually think I believe the Tortorella one, because I feel like there was a certain point in the Columbus season when they were just too far gone, and both coach and players just stopped trying.
Yeah, you could tell a lot of that for sure.
Like, I think Torts knew once, their playoff dreams were just that, dreams. I think he knew that his time was done there, and he just let them have fun.
Yeah. I mean, he still benched Line a bunch, but the rest of them got to have fun.
I mean, Carl, he's still Torts. He can't coach an NHL game without benching somebody.
That's fair. Sorry, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
No, there's just a great story about, I think it was Merzlikins had told him on a timeout that he was going to try and score on the empty net at the other end of the ice. And Torts' reply was essentially just, F it, go for it. That to me was when I was like, yeah, these guys, they're not even trying anymore.
We're doing what we want. It's going to be good. All right. So, and Kekalainen came out today, and I thought made an interesting statement. He said that, like, he was asked if they're going to try to go with a different style coach than Torts. And part of his answer to that was that some players do better with a hardline coach, and some of them do better with a softer coach. And it takes all kinds, and we're open to both ideas. So who knows? We could see Torts 2.0 run through Columbus.
It's a bit of a non-answer, I think. We could do either one.
You know what? That's a great idea. We should consider which kind of a coach. I'm going to write this down. I'm going to.
Okay. Well, now we know Tochet's available, right? What are some of the other free agent coaches out there? Because there's some good ones out there.
Yeah. I'm sure there are.
Gerard Gallant's still available.
I was going to say, Gerard Gallant was literally the one I was like, we still haven't hired him yet, have we?
He's not been hired yet.
Okay.
Do you have a list up? Because I just want to name some names that I have no idea if hired or not.
All right. Let me pull up a list here. NHL coaching free agents.
I'm pretty sure Peter Laviolette is hired somewhere. Is he in Washington?
He's
Philadelphia.
Not in Washington. Yeah, he's hired though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's the other guy that I always get him confused with? Alain Vigneault.
He's hired. He's in New York.
Alain Vigneault? He's not the head coach in New York.
Who am I thinking of? Oh no.
You're thinking about that young, handsome guy.
Yeah. No, you're correct. Vigneault is not currently hired by anyone.
Okay. So he's out there. Gerard Gallant's out there.
Yep.
Mike Babcock has not been hired yet.
Correct.
I think he's doing something at like the University of Saskatchewan or something.
That's like a volunteer deal. So I'm sure the University of Saskatchewan would let him go.
So he's available. Tochet's available, we said.
There's a big name that you are missing.
It's not Barry Trotz. He's in New York.
It's close to Trotz, though. It's one that I often tend to get confused.
I don't know. Who is it?
Bruce Boudreau.
Oh, Bruce Boudreau. So he's out there.
He's out there.
Man, there's Jeff Blashill's going to be available now.
Yep.
His contract's up.
Yeah.
Throw him in the mix with all these all-star coaches.
And we saw a lot of drama this weekend. Rob Brindamore's contract for next year, he is technically a free agent coming up this year. So the Carolina Hurricanes chose to very poorly coordinate on social media. I don't know if you saw this.
I did see it.
They tried to celebrate him being there for 3 years. And they even tricked old Chris Johnson. He thought they were extending him for 3 years. They were just like, no, we've had him for 3 years. So confusion all around. Who even knows what's happening?
And apparently their contract negotiations have kind of gone sour.
Yeah, well, it was rumored that 3 years was the length. So that's understandably confusing. But nonetheless, we've got some coaches coming up on the block. But Arizona is an interesting spot. And I want to cycle back to them real quick because they are the last team left to be eliminated in the Elimination Station. Thank you. Shout out to the Nashville Predators it took a while for them to help us fix things. And ultimately we did have to fix it, but we didn't have to refix our fix.
You know what, though, Carl? It kind of made me mad because now this week we're eliminating Arizona after they've officially been eliminated. Whereas if Nashville had just stuck to our plan for them and stayed out of the playoffs, we could have eliminated Arizona last week and been done with the Elimination Station this year.
It's true. We would have had a flawless season, and yet here we are.
Oh, well.
So, welcome to the Elimination Station, Arizona.
I'm like, are you as surprised as I am at how late we are eliminating them?
A little bit. I did not think that the Arizona Coyotes would be the last team eliminated. I did not think that the Dallas Stars would be eliminated before them, or the Flyers, or the Rangers. There's definitely a lot of teams that I thought would be worse than the Coyotes this year.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely thought that we would have eliminated them much sooner than this. Before we get into what we're going to do to fix them, can we acknowledge that we do not have to fix Phil Kessel?
That man is, 900 points for the career he had this weekend.
He is the leading point scorer on this team. He is the leading goal scorer on this team. He's in year 2006, like year 14 of his NHL career, and he just had another 20-goal season. Good for him.
Which is essentially a 30-goal season, right? Like on pace for that. And I definitely thought, after the last couple of years, especially his Arizona time, definitely felt like he wasn't necessarily doing it as well as he used to. That man continues to perform.
Yes, he does, Carl. And you know what? He agrees with you right now. You can't see it, but he's nodding his head.
I think he's actually thicker now than he is in that picture.
It looked like it, didn't it?
My goodness. That man certainly knows how to work out.
He sure does. And it's working for him.
Yeah, good on him.
Now, Phil Kessel aside, this team is pretty young.
Yes.
Right? They got some oldies. Alex Goligoski's on this team.
What's interesting about them is that I feel like they were progressing in a way that in a lot of senses stopped this year, and yet they still did fairly well. right? Like Clayton Keller would have loved way more out of him, right? Not someone that I was very excited for him, and I still am. I still think that he can have a great career because he is, as you said, still young. He's 22.
Yeah.
And he had, 35 points this year. Good. But I expected more out of him. I expected more out of, Churchin continues to develop as a defenseman. He's one that I think is going to be quite good for this team.
Yep.
And then some of those older, the old guys on this team, right? Oliver Ekman-Larsson at 29 is hands down one of the oldest players on this roster.
It's pretty crazy.
And we've seen this before, and there's been talks repeatedly. How much longer does Larson have on this team? Ekman-Larsson have on this team?
I don't know. That was a big question before he re-signed with them. And then he re-signed with them. So I don't know. I think a long time.
Okay, so you think that like they should just, they're able to just put that behind, and he is now the full captain of this team, and the media should stop asking for him to leave.
Yes, I think so. I literally can't see the end of his contract on the cap friendly page. So
it just keeps going.
It's time to accept that he's going to be here for a while. He's their guy. Well, and you know what? I'm okay with it.
He's absolutely, as you should be. So you've got him, you've got Churchin, and that's really defensively, that's all that you have with this team. This is one that on a year where a lot of teams are going to be cap strung, the Coyotes have done a pretty good job of handling their cap.
Yeah, for sure. For sure they have been. They're also traditionally they're a cash team, right? Like, haven't the Coyotes always been in the position of trying to hit the cap floor?
Right now they have 920,000 in cap space.
Now they don't have much, but they went out and made some big signings.
They did, right?
But like you said, they're in good shape. You look at next year and the next few years, there's a lot of room here to work with.
Marian Hossa is finally coming off the books this year.
Marian Hossa is still, holy, that's over $5 million.
He's on long-term IR, so it doesn't really matter for cap. And I'm sure it's insured. They wouldn't have picked up an uninsured contract.
True.
With their money situation. But I think from the size that I look at, there's a lot of things that they need to be able to fix moving forward. And there's a ton of holes on this roster that need to be fixed this year. And there's not, they have some players that they can bring up and start to fill some of these spots with, but there's not a ton of like great prospects that this team has. They've kind of drafted in that mid-range, and this is, their performance this year hasn't helped that, right? They're not going to be getting a great prospect this year. They're going to be getting a good one. And with what drafting and scouting is this year, who knows what that could become. So for me, I am looking at them as at a big crossroads of where to go next.
And where do you think that they should go? Like, which road should they take?
I think that they need to do a little bit of building up those stockpiles of prospects. Because last year, the Taylor Hall trade, they lost some there. Their scouting rule breaking, they don't have a first this year because of that.
Yeah.
So they have to build up some of those prospect pools a bit. And so, and just fill in some low cost players around that. I think you shouldn't be signing big long-term guys. If you want to go out and sign some reasonably priced contracts, some guys in like the $4 or $5 million range, sure, but they shouldn't be. I know they went after Taylor Hall once. They should not be trying to go after him and the likes of him this offseason. This is not what I think they need.
I tend to agree, although I think they got to work on their decor a little bit, like you pointed out. Because even if you look at who they've got right now, Jacob Chikrin is the youngest defenseman they have at 23. The next youngest defenseman is 27 years old. Like, you talk about their drafting and their prospects, they've primarily, from what I can see here, it looks like they've focused on drafting forwards. And I think they got to go out and get some young defensemen who can compete in that division.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Now, what about goaltending? Because that's going to be a question mark for them in the next couple of years.
Right. Well, because, I mean, Antti Ranta contract up, and I think like time is up for him in Arizona, right? I think they will also mutually agree to part ways at the end of this season. Darcy Kemper, okay.
Sure.
Right. So outside of that, there's not a ton that I'm looking at to be super pumped about. So I kind of look at all those different moves, and yeah, goaltending is a big question mark. I think that they're a team that, I mean, if they want to take the like poor man's Carolina Hurricanes model and run a James Reimer out there and try to have the rest, they're just missing the rest of that roster.
Yeah.
You can have a division winning team without great goaltending. You just have to be incredibly well coached and have talented players.
I mean, look at Carolina's D-core.
Yeah.
Arizona doesn't have that.
No. Not even
so
close.
like if that's what you're going to do, then you got some work to do in front of that goalie. Yeah. But there, like, I don't know, there's a lot going on with this team. Traditionally, they've never really been afraid to make trades. Now they've had some management changes over the last little while and ownership changes and all that. So maybe that's changed, but they could go make some trades, bring in a goalie, bring in a defenseman. I also think, all this management ownership drama, if they can stay away from that stuff going forward, it might make them a more appealing team for players to go play for.
Yes, a little stability can go a long way to getting some teams down there. Because I think, it's not a market that's not able to bring people in. You can win. You just need to show some stability, and I think people would love to play in Arizona.
I think they'll have a much easier time of convincing players to go play there than Columbus has now.
Yeah, I mean, you asked the question, do you want to go play with Patrick Laine or Phil Kessel? And I think people are going to be lining up to play with Phil.
Yeah. It's not even a question. Even Patrick Laine would be like, don't choose me.
So I like it. That's the selling point.
Yeah.
So there we go. I think Arizona, do you think they'll be better or worse than what their performance was this year, next year?
Probably worse. I don't see how they could be better.
I think it would have to take some very big. I mean, I have no idea who that they're going to bring in as a coach. I really hope that they don't bring in some of the old retreads. I want them to try take some. I mean, you have to take some chances. You have to find some ways. And I'm looking at them to be one of those teams that signs a good quality AHL coach, which is hard to evaluate this year. I get that, but bring someone up and make that happen.
I agree. Go with some fresh blood. Go overseas. Hire a European coach.
There you go. I mean, they've got some good ones, right? They've got their last first overall pick. Talk about defenseman. Their last first round pick was a defenseman, but it wasn't since.
Oh, then I was wrong about that.
2019, Victor Soderstrom. They took him 11th overall. But I mean, they didn't have a first round pick last year. They don't have a first round pick this year. So you're not wrong in that they're not drafting defensemen. They're just not
drafting.
They're just not drafting anyone. Exactly. All right, let's take a look. We don't know exactly when the playoffs will be. Our current assumption is that they will probably start this coming weekend for every division except for the North. The North has more extended games to happen. A number of teams either have finished playing or tonight, Monday night, is their last game. There's a handful of teams to still end up their season. But for the most part, we've locked in. So let's just take a quick fly through some of those different teams and those matchups that we're looking at for this season. I think let's start in the Central because that is one that is fully locked in. We have the Hurricanes versus the Predators, Florida versus Tampa.
This is going to be the first time that these Florida teams have met each other in a playoff series. That's going to be pretty interesting and intense. I hope.
One can only hope.
I mean, tensions were running high in the game the other night.
And they're playing tonight. So it's like a warm-up, right?
Yeah.
So that'll be good.
That will be very good. Carolina clinched the top of the division this week.
Yep. And also playing against Nashville, right? They're playing against Nashville right now.
Are they?
Losing 2-0.
And they lost the other night too. That's how Nashville clinched.
Exactly.
They beat Carolina.
I mean, with this, do you think that this is just Carolina in rest mode, or is there some genuine concern? Okay, good.
I'm not concerned about Carolina. I don't think if I was Carolina, I wouldn't be concerned about me either.
All right. So there we go. That takes care of that division. Let's head out to the west, or let's go east. Pittsburgh locked up that division first overall. As of right now, they will be playing the Islanders in the first round. And I mean, any matchup that has the Islanders in it these last few years has been fun to watch. I will certainly tune in for that.
Wild card series. No, it could go either way. I don't know.
I mean, both of these could, right? And it could, they are still, I mean, Boston has 2 games and a point up on the Islanders. So it seems very likely. I don't see what the score is of that game right now. I believe they're tied right now in the second period, those 2 teams. So if Boston even gets a point tonight, they are moving on and facing the Washington Capitals. Boston and Washington. Zdeno Chara returns to Boston in the playoffs on the other team.
That's a pretty crazy story. And that'll be a fun one to watch. Another wild card series, though. Could go either way.
Could, right?
This is a wild card division.
It could be any of those. You roll a dice, flip a coin. I don't care which way you want to do it. Any way it could go. Right? Right. North. Toronto versus Montreal, probably, right? They've got Montreal's currently 2 back of Winnipeg with a game less left. So likely Toronto versus Montreal, which Toronto fans have been clamoring to face anyone but Boston in the first round. And now they face Montreal.
I'm not as confident that Toronto's going to win this one as I am that Carolina's going to win theirs.
I think Toronto can pull it off.
They 100% should be able to.
Yeah.
It just seems like the kind of thing that Montreal would win.
Yeah, this Montreal team is better than I expected them to be this year, but they're still not very good.
No, and they're nowhere near as good as Toronto is.
No.
There's a few, I think, things that could affect the outcome. One being, is Carey Price going to play or not? But really, Toronto should do away with Montreal pretty handily.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we get the unstoppable force versus the immovable object of Connor McDavid versus Connor Hellebuck. The Connor off.
Connor Bowl.
Connor Bowl.
Connor off. I don't know.
I don't know. We don't script this show. I think it's abundantly clear at this point.
I hope so.
So, what do you think?
Edmonton. I think Connor Hellebuck's going to have to be better than normal Connor Hellebuck.
Yeah.
To pull this off.
And Connor McDavid just has to be regular Connor McDavid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we said it last week. I still think this division's going to come down to Edmonton and Toronto.
I think I'm in the same boat there.
And that's going to be a good series.
That will be. All right. To the west, Vegas versus the Blues. The Blues they managed to snuck in, but it is not close where they're sitting in the rest of this division.
No. And Vegas has a chance, I think, to lock up the President's Trophy tonight, depending on the outcome of the Carolina game.
Let's say if Carolina continues to lose, Vegas just needs 1 point in the next 2 games to pull that off. Granted, Colorado also still has a shot at the President's Trophy. However, I'm not expecting that. So Vegas and the Blues, Vegas in 4.
Probably. Should be,
yeah. Which, I mean, again, more defensemen returning to face their old teams. Pietrangelo back in St. Louis.
Also, like that's the Western Conference equivalent of that Chara matchup.
And like a better defenseman at this point, because like Chara.
Oh yeah,
right. A little better. We also then would have Devin Dubnyk returning to face the Minnesota Wild.
So, how do you feel about this series, Carl?
Terrified. I think did.
I'm
I not
scared
say,
for you?
Did I not say I was terrified last week?
Yes, you did.
I'm still terrified.
Yeah, you should be.
I've not gotten more confident.
I don't think the Wild are as good as they're showing, as good as they're playing, and I don't think they're as good as Colorado. Like my gut still tells me Colorado should take this one pretty handily.
I would think so, but I also just saw the Avalanche squeak out 2 wins against the Kings this week by 1 goal. So,
okay, but are they resting?
McKinnon sat for a game. They listed a reason, but I don't think that it's anything to be concerned about. I mean, I hope not. If we're without McKinnon, then
that changes that changes this whole conversation.
Right. But yeah, I mean, that looks, I would assume in the same way that the North is looking like Toronto, Edmonton, I would assume that we're looking at a Vegas, Colorado West final.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, there we go, Nick. Hopefully this weekend we can fire up the playoffs on Saturday. We're going to play just a ton of high-low sticking. We're going to just pick over-unders at random. I'll wake up in the morning and just pick a game, and we'll play it for that day. Whichever game, I mean, some days have multiple games this week, some have one. So it'll be very easy pickings for those. If you're a Vancouver Canucks fan, this is your week. You get some bonus Canucks games this week. We're going to be paying a lot of attention to them. You're not going to like it. It's not going to be pretty, but hey, we're here for it. And we're then going to hand out a winner probably on the show next week. We will hand out another prize. Our friends over at the Store Next Door with their amazing content. We're handing out, we sent out a hat rack to the previous winner. We've got bookend. They have all kinds of amazing stuff. Head to their website. You can see exactly what it is that you're playing for. We give you just a whole collection of stuff that you might want to have, and we'll send those off to you and get those prizes. All you have to do is pick if you think the total goals in each game that we play for will be over or under, and let us know what you think. If you're right, you get a point. All the points are names in a hat at the end. We draw a name, and you only need to be right once. Our last winner only got it correct once, and he got the win. So just ups your odds the more you're in there. So
there you go.
Never too late to play. Tune on in. Head to the fourthlinepodcast.com for more about the show and also some great stuff from the writing team. I know a couple weeks ago we talked about the NHL and like the Super League in Europe and kind of that whole model and things. Brody and Mike had a really interesting article that went up this yesterday about some of those models and like what that could look like in the NHL. So tune in over there. Go take a read of that. Thank you very much to them for writing such a great piece. Find us on Twitter at Fourth Line Podcast. That's where we play the games and we hang out. We don't hang out on the Facebooks for like several obvious reasons. Yes. We're there. You can find us, and mail at thefourthlinepodcast.com. We don't really hang out in our email, but we have it and we read it and we send them. So send that over there if you want something bigger, right? Maybe something that a DM can't handle. But they took off character caps for DMs, so just send us as big a DM as you want. Have at her. We'll be back next week with playoff hockey. I'm very excited for that. It'll be a great time. But until next week,
it's time for us to wrap up another Fourth Line show. I know what you're thinking, that you don't want us to go. If you ever commit a crime, just use the DOPS lawyers. They'll get you a smaller fine.